Outstanding. Great to see everybody. Great to be back in Chicago. I think the third time this year. What a great session with Amr and Andrew on the front end. And I promise you, we're going to deliver an outstanding session with these 1-2 punches here in Steve Pepler and James Lett with Flint Fox. So let's do this. Before we dive into all things tariffs, trades, and a whole bunch more, let's get to know both of y'all a little bit better. And by the way, get your questions ready. We're going to be chatting for about 30 minutes, and we'd love to get your heavy-hitting questions at the end. But James, tell us about yourself, including, I hear you've taken on a massive kitchen project here over the last year.
Oh, disaster. But yeah, so James Lett, the Chief Technology Officer at Flint Fox. Been in the pricing and rebate space for 22 years or so. My team, based out of Auckland in New Zealand, and myself are kind of focused on building that technology infrastructure to enable businesses such as yourselves to manage and execute on complex pricing strategies and plans and things at scale, at speed, in real time. The kitchen project is an interesting one. Anybody that's done DIY probably feel my pain, understand that I'm a sucker for punishment. What started as a change a few cabinets, finished by Christmas, this is Christmas last year, is still underway. We knocked out walls, we added walls, and it's not yet finished, to my wife's dismay. So over budget, over time, scope creep, sounds a bit like software development. Not Flint Fox enabled software development, of course. But yeah, that's the story.
Oh, there's a whole bunch more there, but thank you, James. I appreciate that. All right, Steve Pepler, great to see you here today. Alex took my thunder a little bit, but we all want to celebrate Henry's. But tell us a little about yourself and tell us about Henry.
Yeah, no, thank you. But the grandfather thing was awesome last night. So I'm Steve Pepler. I've been with Flint Fox on and off for about 25 years. I was actually a customer originally, trying to deal with the challenges that Flint Fox actually helps deal with every single day around pricing, promotions, deductions, all that sort of stuff. So I've been in Flint Fox. I've done just about everything except be a developer because I'm not a tech person, even though I'm in a tech company. And I'm in Canada now, back closer to home where I grew up. But I've been all around the world with Flint Fox, New Jersey, New Zealand. I was in California, back in Toronto. So glad to be here.
Is Henry going to be an all-star rugby player like you were?
He's got his whole kit already. I bought a whole kit when I was in New Zealand recently.
Love it.
He's got the shorts and the shirt. He's all
Love
set.
It. Outstanding. Well, congrats again. And one other quick side note, some folks may not know, Steve and James have worked together for 22 years. And we all know relationships make everything happen across global business. So you are really in for a treat here over the next 30 minutes or so. So we got our work cut out for us. We're going to jump right in with a trend we heard, spoke about in the last session. We're hearing it everywhere out in business circles, certainly supply chain circles, tariffs. In fact, yesterday, Omar Nashashibi gave a great session, I believe, well received. I heard a lot of great things about that. So I want to start with this overall highly evolving trade environment where that's top of mind for so many business leaders as they're navigating, they're looking deep into their crystal ball. Steve, let's start with you. What are you expecting impact-wise with the latest wave of tariffs?
Yeah, so we're seeing quite a lot of confusion. I think that's the first thing that people are trying to understand. What's being tariffed? How much is it being tariffed? Is it being tariffed 3 or 4 times? Are they buying something that's tariffed, or are they trying to sell something that's tariffed? So a lot of confusion, which creates a lot of operational inefficiencies and issues around how do I deal with this, and also, if you don't deal with it correctly, you can lose a lot of margin pretty quickly. So there's a lot of fear in the marketplace that we're seeing.
I heard the same thing since the start of the year, for sure. And that fear creates a big ripple effect of complexities, especially across the global supply chain ecosystem, which in turn creates a ton of questions for business leaders and their teams. That you're seeing that
yeah,
too,
we're
huh?
seeing that, and it was interesting this week listening to some of the speakers around. It's not just, hey, this product is made out of steel, so it has one tariff, but it's also, there's additional tariffs around what was the country of origin, who actually shipped the product, who owned the container that was shipped in, all that sort of stuff. So it makes it very difficult as somebody who's trying to buy products to understand in advance what the full impact of the price will be until they actually receive it. And it may change again in a few weeks. So that complexity is something you need to be very nimble around to manage effectively. And you need to have a strategy in place to decide, am I going to front run these things? Am I going to try to gain some share against others because of their confusion? So, yeah.
Well, and we're going to touch on that in a minute, because it's creating another common theme I've heard is, despite all the chaos and disruptions, creating lots of opportunities. We're going to touch on that later in the conversation. James, the tariffs and the overall VUCA environment isn't going to hit every sector and every industry the same. What are some niches in the industry that are going to really feel the pain the most?
Yeah, so when you think of manufacturers, for example, particularly those with kind of complex international supply chains, so think automotive, high-tech, electronics, industrial equipment, these are industries that often have components that are crossing the border multiple times. So again, we sort of heard this yesterday with Omar's presentation, but I think it was BMW was the example, manufacturing an engine, crossing the border 5, 6, 7 times, and each time that's happening, you're potentially hit with more and more tariffs, so that tariff implication is multiplied out. But also distributors, retailers, thin margins, so a lot more sensitivity to price increases, dealing with imported goods, and anybody that's like direct shipping from international vendors. Again, you're going to kind of accelerate that impact from tariffs. You've kind of got no stock on hand to kind of buffer that. You kind of, if you're going to make a change, you need to make that change quickly. So those industries in particular.
Can anybody relate to anything that James just shared? Raise your hand if you feel any of that pain. Okay, I expect a lot more hands raised. Okay, 2 hands over here. Love it. What do you want to add before I shift gears into what we should be doing? Anything you want to add to what he just shared there, Steve?
In terms of pain, another renovation going on at my house, and I had to buy taps. And the company is an American company. Taps are designed in Canada, but the assembly and manufacturing is done in China, and they go back and forth. And you know, if you're buying things like that, you just have no idea if you have to buy a new spare part, is it going to cost twice as much, and how are they going to pass that through? And
right.
There's a lot of confusion.
I liked Amar's point earlier, where he was challenging his team to be prepared for maybe worst case scenario, 65% tariffs on products from China. Yeah. That's not where we are, but we'll see. So all the more reason to talk about the strategies and actions that businesses are turning to, and that's where I want to continue with you here, Steve.
Sure.
How are organizations not only reacting but preparing for what we're seeing now, but also what we're predicting to come?
Yeah. So we're seeing a lot of organizations, and they've done this starting with COVID, when prices were going up and down. They're proactively dealing with their contracts so that they can have wording in there that allows them to make a price change more rapidly than they would have in the past, so that it doesn't take 90 days or 120 days to pass a new cost increase on. So we're seeing that. We're also seeing some of our customers who are thinking about it, and there was some speakers that talked about this as well. It could be an opportunity for many, and how they deal with their customers. So even if they have, a locked-in price agreement, are they going to share the full price increase with their key customers, or are they going to level it down a bit with some inventoried product costs, things like that? But there's a need there to be nimble and to be able to see things in real time as fast as you can, so that you can react and not be. If it takes you 30 days to make a price change, and you've got a 60-day contract term that says you can't change it for 60 days, that means you're now locked in for 90 days. So, yeah, we're seeing a lot of that.
Well, so we're also seeing a lot of wait and see, right? Wait and see mode. And we all understand why, because we haven't really been able to fully define the problem, right? Based on all the shifts, the hour by hour shifts in some cases. So what else? So we understand why that's taking place, but what drawbacks do you really see with this wait and see approach?
Yeah, if you wait and see, then you're open to a lot of risk in terms of your pricing and your rebates and everything else. So what we're seeing with a lot of customers is, rather than waiting and seeing, proactively look out, and if there's a news article that says, hey, Chinese products are going up 100%, then take that price increase today, even if you're not sure you're going to be impacted by that, so you can get ahead of it. Whereas if you wait and see, like I said, it could be 90, 120 days before you actually recover any of that cost increase, and now your margin's significantly impacted.
Waiting and seeing just creates a lot more pain, can create a lot more pain, right?
Yeah.
James, you're getting a billion-dollar question, maybe trillion-dollar given all the inflation, but you're going to get it regardless. What are the measures, that business leaders got to be taking today?
So, in a perfect world, right? So one of the things that Tariffs is trying to encourage is local manufacturing, buying and selling local goods, but I'm sure we can all understand it's pretty hard to kind of switch to a local supply chain overnight when tariffs are coming in that quickly. So essentially pricing and rebates are your most effective tools to respond to tariffs. But of course you need systems and processes in place to be able to have that visibility of margins and costs and which products are changing, your costs are changing, and by how much. And you need to be able to change pricing quickly because, as Steve was mentioning, like you wait too long, each time you wait and you're incurring those costs but not perhaps passing them on, you've got that margin leakage coming through. So some of the things you kind of need to look at with your pricing is tariff-specific pricing components. So rather than just looking at my landed cost is going up, to break that landed cost out so you have tariff-specific componentry of that. It gives you a whole bunch of flexibility. For example, you may say, look, I'm going to pass the tariff cost on, but I want to maintain my margins as they are today. So you can have your landed cost excluding tariffs, do your markups, margins and things, and then pass on 100%, 80% or whatever it may be of your tariffs on, so you can maintain being competitive, but without kind of losing your margin effectively. The other thing that is really complicated, right, is your channel and regional pricing. So you'll probably find that your competitors are different in each channel, in each region, and your competitors are going to be affected by tariffs differently to you. And so being able to have pricing that differs by channel, differs by region, means you can maintain being competitive. It's sort of less of a one-size-fits-all kind of approach these days. The other thing too is that one thing we do know around tariffs is there will be change. They're not going to be as they are today. They might change tomorrow, they might change next week. That change is sort of guaranteed. So you can kind of be prepared for that. You can scenario out, model out some scenarios and go, right, well, what if the tariffs get reduced next week to XYZ or they increased? What should I do? So you can kind of have the upper hand and be prepared. So modeling out some of those scenarios I think would be really helpful as well.
Love that, James. Very practical advice. George, before I've got two key follow-up questions for James. You want to add on anything to what he suggests in terms of what business leaders should be doing?
Yeah, and I think the one point about different geographies and channels and things is very important. So you need to be able to react differently depending on your situation competitively in different markets and things. We talked to some customers the other day who they were able to move some of their manufacturing back and forth, but they've been doing this kind of proactively over the last few years in anticipation. And by creating a broader portfolio of markets and opportunities and things, they can kind of ride the wave out where some will be they'll be gaining share in other areas. They might choose to not be as competitive and price differently. So, yeah. And I think the pass-through part is another good important point. So, if you're open with your customers and you show that this is a tariff and it's a separate line-by-line distinct part of your invoice, then you can justify, you can see this is what we've done and this is what we're passing through. So we're not taking advantage of you, or we're not doing this or that. It's like a fuel surcharge, and people are used to that concept of fuel surcharges. They may get used to the concept of tariff add-ons.
Great thoughts. That deconstructed pricing allows us to protect the relationship by still making the adjustments we got to do, but leaning into the rationale behind it. Okay, so James, you get a two-part follow-up question. You get all the tough questions, I think.
It seems like it, doesn't it?
All right, so how do Enable and Flint Fox fit into all this? And why is pricing execution so important?
Yeah, so one of the big things, or big factors, I guess, on pricing execution, I'd probably summarize as speed, visibility, and complexity. So when I talk about speed, it's not just the speed at which you can execute pricing when a customer places an order, but the speed at which you can make changes in your pricing system. So once you decide, hey, look, I'm going to pass on some, all, or whatever of the tariffs through to customers, you need to be able to make that change quickly. So your system needs to be able to support changing sometimes thousands of different prices. If you've got some smart rules, being able to change your tariff pass-on cost kind of in one place and have it affect everything quickly. So speed's really important. Visibility, of course. So if you don't know what your costs are and how they're changing, it makes it very tough to make a decision on what you should do. So you need to have that visibility and see what costs are changing and by how much, what products from what manufacturers, from what suppliers and things like that. And complexity, so you may have had simple pricing now. It's almost impossible to have that with tariffs, right? Because you can't be competitive applying a simple one-size-fits-all price across all regions, across all channels, particularly when you've got different products tariffed at different rates, and that changing so much. So you kind of need to be able to execute some price complexity. And of course, Flint Fox enable best of breed pricing and rebate solutions that can essentially handle all of this complexity at scale, at speed, and give you that visibility that's really needed.
So what I heard there, and I welcome your thoughts there too, Steve, but times call for more nuanced, more complex pricing, and to do that without belaboring your team and creating more hours and hours of work, you need to bring in the right partners to help make that easier, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Steve, anything else to add before I shift gears here?
Yeah, no, I think that the whole, and we're maybe talking about it later, but the idea of technology and enabling yourself to be able to make these kind of changes and things is very important. So if you're struggling today to manage tariffs as they are, just know that it's not going away. And so you need to prepare technologically, internally, process-wise as well, so that you can deal with the change in the future.
And maybe that was something that drove the wait and see approach around, hey, look, tariffs are changing so much, perhaps next week they'll just all go away. Yeah. I think, we all heard, again, from Omar yesterday, tariffs are not going to go away. There's lots more changes to come, and even a year from now, 2 years from now, they're still going to be around. So the wait and see approach and that keep with simple pricing isn't really going to cut it anymore.
If anyone missed the session yesterday with Omar, go back. Hopefully we got it recorded. We had a good fortune interviewing him about about 2 weeks ago probably. And he is incredible, knows his craft. Okay, so Steve, we are at the world's only rebate-focused conference, right up here in Chicago. So we got to discuss rebates and how they fit in, which it's a tremendous opportunity, especially organizations taking a modern-day, forward-looking approach to rebates. Your thoughts there?
Yeah, there's one of the things that we're seeing over time is companies want to pay for performance, so they want to influence the end buyer, whether that be direct if they're selling direct, but most of the times they're selling through distributors, and it's a win-win for both. Can be a win-win for the manufacturer and the distributor to offer the distributor a pass-through sort of incentive to when they sell to certain customers and lock them in. So like I think we heard the term yesterday of barrier to exit. And if you've got a preferred price or discount from the manufacturer that you're passing on as a distributor, then you're more likely to be able to keep that customer as your customer. And you pay that through various methods, and whether you call it a SPA, a ship and debit, anything like that. But those types of rebates are going to be more important as you try to protect your share with your key accounts and incentivize them to stay with you, both as the manufacturer and as a distributor. And there's different levers in terms of rebates that come into play. But that's just an example of one way.
Great opportunity to strengthen, one of many ways to strengthen and gain more trust and success in supply chain ecosystems, I think. Yeah. Anything else to add before I keep moving, James?
Steve's got it pretty well covered there, I think.
All right, let's talk more about pricing. A couple of critical questions related to pricing. And Steve, I'm going to stick with you here. Back to those forward-thinking organizations that are leaning into all the current sets of scenarios and trends and just a situation we find ourselves in. We can't do business like we've always done it in so many different ways.
Yep.
So when it comes to those forward-thinking organizations using pricing strategically and effectively in response to tariffs, what are you seeing?
Sure.
What are they doing?
Yeah, so there's all different ways in which you can respond. I mean, you could do, as James suggested, just pass the tariff through as a charge, leave everything else the same. Your customer can see what's happening. It's very easy to explain. Or you can use this as an opportunity to increase your margins. So tariffs went up on 50% of your product, but you can increase the entire product by the same rate as the portion that was increased and increase your margins. Who's going to know is kind of the answer in that case. But
you saw a lot of that back in COVID kind of days too,
Yeah.
right? Well, prices are going up, and some of that was the result of COVID and supply chain troubles and things like that. Some of it was opportunistic.
Right.
Yeah, so there's an opportunity. So you have to set your strategy and then use your levers that you have in terms of pricing and rebates to execute those. So you may have some products where you're happy to absorb a bit of margin because you're in a competitive situation, whereas others you're going to take full advantage and try to grow your share, grow your margins all at the same time. And then there may be those that you just want things to be the same and pass through the tariff. So there's lots of different ways, and again, through different channels, you can have different approaches to pricing in different markets. And especially now, we're talking about tariffs mostly going into the US, but there are retaliatory tariffs in a lot of places like Canada, where I'm from, and you can have a different pricing strategy now in Canada than you may have in the US based on what's being tariffed versus what isn't. So, yeah.
One of the things you alluded to there, James, I want to ask you about is, as we said earlier, a lot of times chaos creates opportunity. And we know in some of these cases, ABC company is not going to get hit with a tariff, but their big competitor, DEF company, is going to get hit by a tariff. So how can organizations, beyond the obvious, really take full advantage of the opportunity here, James?
Well, certainly if you're not being hit with tariffs, you've got a whole range of different options available to you. Sometimes it feels a bit like a unicorn, because we kind of almost assume that everybody's going to be hit with tariffs in some shape or form, and that may well be the case, but there are some of us that perhaps aren't the unicorns amongst us. And so you've got kind of three options around pricing. So you could choose to maintain your pricing, leave it as it is. I'd encourage you to kind of make that a conscious decision. Don't just go, hey, look, I'm not affected by tariffs, and not think much further. Make that a conscious decision that you're not going to change pricing, because you really should be looking at your competitors in the marketplace and say, right, well, I could actually increase my pricing. Maybe not quite as much as what the tariffs, your competitors are being hit by tariffs, but you know that if you increase your prices, you may not, probably can't be undercut. So there's a sort of an opportunity there. Or you may actually choose to decrease your price, which sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but if your competitors are being hit by tariffs and they're needing to increase their prices, and you come along and decrease your pricing, you can go after market share, and that's pretty compelling for buyers, right? Everybody's increasing their pricing and you're decreasing it. You can sort of come out of that with a much bigger market share. So it comes down to your price strategy and things, but certainly there's a range of different options and opportunities there for sure.
James, I can almost see the millions of scenarios running through your brain right this second. I'm going to ask for y'all's key takeaways in just a second, and then we're going to open it up to questions. So hopefully y'all got some good questions coming. Don't let me down, okay? Steve, do you want to comment on that opportunity again that James is describing?
What James described is pretty unique that's happening, and price elasticity that's where you can really look at things and say, hey, if I'm a really elastic market where a small price increase can lead to a big drop in share, if you're not subject to a tariff, then a small price increase may lead to a massive increase in sales. So you can be, you have to set your strategy before you actually decide what you want to do, and you can test some things, go through scenarios, etc. But there's going to be opportunities for some and challenges for others, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you aren't hit with a tariff, you might want to go buy a lottery ticket because your luck is pretty good. Okay. Really enjoyed. I've enjoyed our pre-show conversations. Really enjoyed the last 25 minutes or so. Before we take questions from the audience, we're in information overload right now, especially not even information, certainly data overload too, right? I'm sure they're taking a lot back to their organizations and their teams, but from the last 30 minutes or so, if you had to double down on one thing, and Steve, I'm gonna start with you. If you would leave one key takeaway with all the folks in this room, what would that be?
Yeah, I think I don't want to toot our own horn a bit too much, but I think you need to start investing in abilities to make changes to pricing and rebates quickly and make sure you've got lots of visibility so that you can understand your margins, you can understand your costs, and you can see those things, and you can react in real time as opposed to waiting. As James said earlier, it's not just the ability to get a price or a rebate in your hands, it's the ability to make a change so that it can now be out in the marketplace quickly. The last thing you want to do, like I said, is have to wait 30, 40, 60 days to react to a cost increase. You lose all that margin over that time period. There's an opportunity to front load some of these things. I mean, back in the days when I worked for a food company, when coffee prices were in the news and it was, coffee's going up in Colombia, we would raise the price of coffee in the stores well in advance of the commodity price actually increasing. And then when the prices go down, you wait again and lower after people are saying, well, where's the retail decrease? So, that nimbleism or being able to make those things in advance of tariffs. A lot of people assume tariffs are on everything, so try to take advantage and have a strategy.
Okay, and if I heard what you said, if you don't get help with Enable and Flint Fox, get help somewhere.
Yeah,
right?
Somewhere, anywhere. Yeah.
Your people deserve it for sure.
Absolutely.
There's a better way. Okay, James, how about you? Key takeaway, if there was one thing, key takeaway for the audience here.
Yeah, I think being nimble is absolutely critical. Obviously, you need the systems and processes and tools and things to be able to do that. But it is a bit of snooze, you lose kind of thing, right? You wait too long, the longer you wait, all of that time is margin leakage, margin compression, and maybe not by choice. It's delay of making a decision because you didn't have that visibility, knowing what costs are increasing by for which products and things like that. So being nimble is absolutely critical.
Completely agree. Okay, so we've got some folks with microphones out in the room here. We'd love to get your questions. When you pose a question, I would just ask if you could share your name and also share where you're from. That'd be neat to see. So who has got a question for Steve and James? Right here. Thank you.
Excuse me. Hi. Thank you all for being up here. It was very informative. And I have so many questions. But my name's Kelly.
That's great.
I work with,
all of them.
work with Baymac in Virginia. We're a local distributor. And additional challenges that we're struggling with as a distributor is that we've got manufacturers putting out the notices on this date. This is the tariff that will be enforced. We call for pricing. They say, well, we haven't published our pricing, and we can't tell you what the price is. But we still have to buy it, so we don't have gaps in our inventory. So we don't know what our price is until we're getting the invoice, which is creating margin loss among a bunch of other things. And then we're also having vendors using a sort of allocation of how much you can buy pre-tariff, not really giving you the number, but a percentage, and then that changes and they go back 3 weeks and want to change every invoice price that you put in. Do you have any advice on how we can navigate that? I mean, I can't predict what a vendor's going to charge us if they don't even know what they're going to charge us.
Yeah.
And what was your first name again? I'm sorry.
It's Kelly.
Kelly from Virginia. Okay.
Yeah.
Steve?
The one thing that I've seen that is effective is like that coffee story I shared, is anticipate and see if you can take a price increase based on what you believe the tariffs may be. And you may not be right, but at least and take it sooner so that you can actually start protecting your margin before. And if you're wrong and you need to increase again, that buffer time of, hey, I had 2 or 3 weeks at this price, and now I'm going to be 30 days where my price is not as much as my cost increase, but at least I've already earned some revenue in advance, and I've partially offset that cost increase. Because you can always go down. Going down is easier than going up in the marketplace many times. So.
See, the other thing that, Steve, we were talking about just the other day is, so if you do increase your price sort of in advance on the assumption that you're going to get a cost increase, you could consider offering your customers a bit of an insurance policy by the way of a rebate, so that, hey, look, we've charged you extra because there are cost increases. If they don't come to fruition, then they can perhaps claim a rebate back to kind of return some of those funds. It depends on kind of how nice you want to be with your customers, of course, but there are an option of using both pricing and rebates as a really valuable tool to prevent your leakage of margin and
Protect your customer.
Protect your customer at the same time.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate that. By the way, in that long 1.5-year kitchen project, did you see some price increases over that time?
It's crazy, right? It just blows your mind in terms of how much those construction prices, in New Zealand particularly, and other side of the world, everything's kind of imported, and yeah, it does seem to change.
All the more reason for shorter, micro-targeted projects, right? Who else has a question for us? Back here. And if you could share your name and where you're from, please.
Sure. John Schofield with Hilton Supply Management. And I've got a question, a little bit of a follow-on to Kelly's question. So in our business, we're a group purchasing organization, and so we have 19,000 hotels that buy through our programs. So we're actually on the other side. We want to avoid the price increases for our customers and kind of fight against those. Obviously, the one easy thing to do is try to switch products or switch suppliers to different regions to have less tariffs. But outside of that, what advice would you give to us on what can we do to combat it? To go to our suppliers and manufacturers and try to mitigate those price increases or argue to not have an increase. I don't want to see them increase it ahead of time before they get to tariff. I want to try to hold them as long as I can so we can do right by our customers.
Yeah, there's a couple things we've seen on that regard, and we've heard from previous speakers the last 2 days around working with your manufacturer as a trusted partner and coming to an agreement where maybe you give them a larger share of what you source from them and ask for that SPA or that fixed customer price in advance and share some of the pain. Maybe we talked about inventory. If you've got inventory already, maybe share that cost increase so that the old inventory that you're buying, you blend the price between the new price and the old price, and you come to an agreement and select them as a preferred supplier. That's one way we've seen. I don't know, James, you?
Yeah, I was sort of thinking like if you can share some of that margin compression, but I think it was a presentation yesterday around, but grow the pie. So yes, you're making less for each product that you're buying and the supplier's selling, but there's a lot greater volume, so kind of grow the pie at a compressed margin, kind of share some of the burden on that, and ultimately works well for you, your supplier, and your customers, kind of thing. But it is a tough situation to be in, because obviously you don't want to pass the cost on, but you're being hit with cost yourself, but your supplier's in exactly the same position. But you can kind of have those conversations and kind of work through around opportunities to increase market share, or not just look at alternate suppliers for you, but can your supplier find alternate suppliers themselves for materials or for product itself. It is a tough situation though.
Good, great question, John. I'm sure maybe some follow-up conversations, sidebars the rest of the day. Good stuff, Kelly and John. Who else would like to share a question with our dynamic duo up here?
Hi,
Hey.
Steve, James, good to see you again. I'm Don Liang from Hilton Supply Management, working with John. I have a question from the separate angle for the FlintFox application. So because the pricing sensitivity on different categories can be different, or even at the product level, either business or consumers that for some product that, hey, they definitely, they're probably willing to pay more, and some of the product that probably not, right? So when we increase prices, that if we increase too much too soon, then that likely gonna hit our sales. And so can you explain for the FrameFox solutions, what kind of feature and function that you will help your user with this type of analysis?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, because one of the things we talked about is omnichannels and having different markets that you're selling through, whether that market be a channel or a geography or something else. And if you can take a portfolio approach to your pricing and raise in some markets and not raise as much in other markets, so you're willing to hold your price and maybe lose some margins in one market, but you make it up somewhere else. If you can do those sorts of things, then you need a tool that can actually stratify pricing. It can differentiate pricing based on any factor. The factor can be, where are you, what kind of customer are you, how did you actually order this product, all those sorts of things. If you can do that differentiation, and our tool helps with that as well, then I think you can take a portfolio approach. It's almost like investing for your retirement. Every month you put some money in to kind of dollar cost average versus up and down with big investments at certain points and trying to game the market. If you can do that same approach with your sales, this is a market we're willing to eat some margin because we want to hold our share, but in another market, let's take an opportunity to grow our margins. It'll help offset some of those things, I think.
Yeah, a lot of that sort of product categorization, isn't it? So the price-sensitive products are kind of grouped together versus the non-price-sensitive products and everything in between. And if you've got your tariff cost componentized out from your landed cost, and you say, hey, look, for the ones that are really price-sensitive, maybe I'm not passing on all of that tariff cost, and so that category of products has a lower percentage for that sort of increase versus others. And then, if you can combine, so in the FlintFox tool, right, you can categorize and group products together in any which way you want through a hierarchy. And same on the customer side as well. So you might want to combine both for these price-sensitive products, but in these certain regions, increase pricing differently to other regions and other channels for the same group of products. So you've kind of got that flexibility of kind of product-specific pricing, customer-specific pricing, or a combination thereof. So it's where the complexity comes in, but to try and organize that in a tool that obviously can support it.
That spreadsheets don't always handle.
Yeah, you can imagine the tens of thousands of products across, I think, 90,000 hotels that Dawn's dealing with. Is pretty tough to do in Excel.
Wow. Thank you. Dawn, right? Dawn, did I get that right?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Great questions. Who else would like to pose a question to Steve or James? Anybody? I've got a question for y'all. So y'all been, as I mentioned on the front end, y'all been working together for a long time. And y'all, you can kind of see it on how you play off each other. And I can already envision y'all in meetings with customers and whatnot. Steve, what is one thing that James shared over the last 30 minutes that you would say, hey folks, if you forget everything else I said, listen to this one thing from James. What comes to your mind?
Yeah, I think that whole idea of breaking your costs and pricing down so that you can choose whether or not, how do you see the tariff? Is it a distinct element that you're going to pass on? And then you can use that strategy to, if you don't want to pay a rebate on the tariffed price, you want to pay it on the price before the tariff, you can apply all those sort of things. So that ability to see your price waterfall, both on the costing and on the selling side, is kind of key for executing your strategy. And I think James said it right. It's now you can be internally. You want to have as much visibility as possible with your sales and marketing team, so they can determine, what's our strategy and how are we going to pass this through. I think that visibility was a key thing.
I agree. When I was in metal stamping, we had highly deconstructed pricing, kind of to your point, whether we use it internally or, so we had some very demanding automotive customers that that was the only way we were going to do business. James, likewise, as we wrap, we're doing okay on time? A couple more minutes? I think, okay, good. James, same question for you. What's one thing that Steve shared here?
Yeah, so certainly the key word that sort of stood out for me is being nimble And so obviously that's also a speed component too. You know, if you're making changes, the longer you delay, or you have to delay because you can't be nimble, or you can't apply the thousands of different price changes quickly enough, all of that's essentially lost margin. And so the reason you're doing all of these things is you grow market share, but also, you know, maintain your margins as best you can. And you need to be nimble, responsive, fast, rapid for all those things.
We're all riding that surfboard that was said in the last session, right?
I was just going to build on that and on what Don said as well. I mean, if you can, one of the things we can do in our solution is if you have all those tariff codes and you've got them assigned to products, then you can have the tariff codes in one simple agreement, and if they change, you can upload the change to the tariffs and immediately have that show up in your pricing as either a simulation, and it can be date-based. So, hey, the tariff we think is going to change July 2nd from 25 to 75%. Update that agreement, run a simulation, tell me how that affects my margins and my pricing. So, yeah.
Lots of opportunity, lots of ways we can change how we play the game, so to speak, and we're going to have to, undoubtedly. So, I really appreciate everybody being here. Big round of applause for Steve Pepler and James Lett. We look forward to Henry being on the stage as well soon, but y'all have a great rest of your catalogs, and we'll see you here in a couple hours.